My wife, Evelina, had ESP. I know it sounds unbelievable, but it's true. Initially, I was skeptical, just like anyone else would be. However, over the years we spent together, the sheer number of accurate predictions she made was impossible to ignore. She could predict who was calling before we picked up the phone. She would suggest alternate routes on the highway that saved us from traffic jams or accidents. Even her hesitation to buy certain products that she felt uneasy about often proved justified. Her extrasensory perception was something we both came to accept as real. Evelina was also an avid dreamer. Nearly every morning, she would eagerly share the night's dreams with me. Some of them were incredibly funny, while others were eerily precise in their detail. It seemed like her dreams were another avenue through which her ESP manifested itself. We adapted to her unique gifts, got married, and had two wonderful children, Jasper and Amara. As I recount this story, both of them are off at university, leaving Evelina and me with a quieter household. I became concerned when Evelina stopped sharing her dreams. For almost 2 weeks, she hadn't sprung out of bed to recount her nocturnal adventures. Over breakfast one day, I decided to ask her about it. "Evelina, you haven't told me about your nighttime adventures in Dreamland lately. What's going on?" I asked. "Oh," she replied, looking flustered. "The dreams have been even too weird for me. I don't think you need to hear them." Any husband knows that such a comment is just an invitation to dig deeper. "Come on, Evelina. I've been hearing about your dreams throughout our married life. Why stop now?" "Because," she hesitated, "because you may not like what you hear." "There. I've said it. Now please leave it be." Her unexpected outburst gave me pause. For her to even consider not sharing her dreams meant they must be profoundly disturbing. We'd always had diverse topics in her dream narrations, so I never knew what to expect each morning. But this felt different, more intense. I began to wonder what could be so troubling that she couldn't talk about it. Was it the deaths of her parents? The scare with Jasper right after his birth? The mysterious disappearance of Amara for one night when she was 18? Or was it something about her past relationships? We had discussed our pasts extensively early in our marriage, both my girlfriends and her boyfriends. I decided to let it be for the moment. Patience would pay off, I told myself. Eventually, it would surface, whatever it was. I prided myself on being a good husband, without tooting my own horn too loudly. As an accountant, I had provided a stable, if not extravagant, income that afforded our family a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. I considered myself a level-headed person, slow to anger but quick to find humor in life. Our home was filled with laughter and good-hearted fun. Of course, raising 2 children had its challenges, but those were balanced by moments of absolute joy. Evelina and I enjoyed a comfortable relationship. After the initial fiery passion of our early years, we had settled into a more tranquil partnership, punctuated by occasional rekindlings of that original spark. We both embraced this evolution with no regrets. We often discussed how our lives had progressed and agreed that we had little to complain about. Our finances were stable, our health was good, and we looked forward to the possibility of grandchildren and future travels. Yet I could see that this particular dream was really troubling Evelina. Her silence stretched on for another 2 weeks until, one morning, she rushed into the kitchen and sat down abruptly. "Orion, I have to tell you about this dream. It's killing me," she said, visibly distraught. Normally, we discussed everything openly, even if it sometimes led to heated debates. My calm nature usually balanced out Evelina's more emotional approach, and our arguments rarely lasted long before we found a compromise, often ending in laughter or a loving embrace. I poured us both coffee, bracing myself for what was surely going to be an interesting revelation. Evelina was nervous. She wrung her hands, a telltale sign that she needed to focus. "Orion," she began, "I dreamt that I would see Matthew before I die. Before my life is over." Holy crap, I thought, stunned. Is she having premonitions about her own death? This is new. Now I'm genuinely worried. "Orion," she continued, "I keep having the same dream every night. It's becoming more and more urgent. I just can't seem to shake it. You know who I mean, don't you? Matthew Harris. The boy I met in New Zealand many years ago." Now she looked at me with those desperate eyes I rarely saw in Evelina. I knew exactly who Matthew Harris was. I had met him only once, the day after our wedding. The story went that when Evelina was 18, she and a close friend joined a tour group for a 2-week journey through New Zealand's 2 main islands. It was an exciting adventure for her. Though she had traveled overseas before, this was her first independent trip without her parents. The tour group, largely composed of young adults, spent a lot of time together on the bus. Matthew was part of that group, and he and Evelina grew very close during the tour. Back then, Evelina and I were merely school acquaintances. However, when I later saw pictures from the trip, it was clear they had shared a deep bond. By then, Evelina and I were a couple, and I had to push down a twinge of jealousy at the thought that the woman I loved might have been intimate with another man. I reassured myself that it was all in the past, and we were in a different place now. After all, I had my own share of past relationships that I had put behind me. I was a bit irked when, the day after our wedding, we had to delay our honeymoon departure because Matthew wanted to drop off his wedding gift. I only agreed because Evelina's family insisted we wait. Matthew had taken a late flight from New Zealand and could only make it that morning, having missed the wedding itself. Poor Matthew, flying all that way and not even seeing the wedding, Evelina's mother had said sympathetically. She knew about Evelina's history with Matthew, seemingly more than I did, but was supportive of our marriage nonetheless. I always had the impression that she might have been just as happy if Evelina had married Matthew, though this was never explicitly stated, just a feeling I had. Nonetheless, they always treated me with the respect deserving of a son-in-law, and I reciprocated. Evelina's family was easy to get to know, and I grew to love them like my own parents. A flawless wedding celebration was extremely important to Evelina's mother, who found the idea of someone traveling so far only to miss out on the festivities almost unbearable. "Orion, you just have to wait a little longer. There's no need to rush off. You'll have the rest of your lives together," she insisted. Evelina and I waited. As the taxi from the airport pulled into our driveway, a strikingly handsome man emerged. He was about my build, with an impeccably maintained head of almost blonde hair and a complexion so smooth it seemed almost unreal. Despite the long flight, he appeared effortlessly fresh and dapper. Evelina ran to him immediately. "You made it, Matthew. I didn't think you could." My instinctive urge to assert my presence surged, but the public setting and the chorus of oohs and ahs from onlookers quelled it somewhat. The greetings were all very cordial and filled with hugs. Matthew handed over his wedding gift, a luxurious leather bag. I remember thinking, great, something we can both use. After that, we left and never saw Matthew again. Yes, Evelina, I remember Matthew. So, did your dream explain why you had to see him so urgently? I coaxed her, hoping she would articulate her dream. I had found that making her talk about her dreams often alleviated any anxieties they caused. No, that's the strange part, Orion. There was no clear reason, just an overpowering feeling that I needed to see him before my life ends. This was an incredibly vivid sensation, something I've never experienced so strongly in a dream before. I'm not joking about this. I have to go. Her words left me in a dilemma. Evelina's ESP was a significant and genuine part of her life, our life, and following her intuition had usually brought us good outcomes. But the nature of ESP is often ambiguous, like driving with a muddy windshield. You get glimpses of what's ahead, but never the full picture. History is littered with people who faced disaster because they solely relied on intuition for major decisions. I knew I needed to temper her urgency and let things unfold more gradually. We were both retired, so there were no logistical barriers preventing us from traveling to New Zealand. It was even on our bucket list, and we had planned to visit in September, just 9 months away. I wondered if our plans for this future trip had triggered her dream in the first place. However, a nagging feeling in my gut told me it wasn't a good idea to rush. Yes, I had gut feelings too, and as I got older and my gut grew larger, so did my instincts. I hugged Evelina tightly from behind. "Evelina, I understand that you feel this is urgent, but let's hold off. We were planning to go in September already. Are you willing to wait until then?" She nodded, and though her eyes reflected an understanding of the logic in waiting, a desperate urgency still lingered. We held the embrace for a while, savoring the warmth and comfort. Over the years, we had perfected the art of the perfect hug, neither too tight nor too loose, just enough to share our desire for closeness. September couldn't come fast enough for Evelina. Since her revelation, she had become almost obsessed, scouring social media to find Matthew. Eventually, she located him and his details. She could recite his profile by heart. Married, 3 now adult children, divorced, and living alone in Queenstown on the South Island. Coincidentally, Queenstown was where we planned to base ourselves during our trip to New Zealand. Evelina meticulously planned everything. She bought the tickets, booked the hotels, and then messaged Matthew to let him know when and where we would be. This made me a bit uneasy, but I knew how important the visit was to her. If she didn't get this out of her system, it would gnaw at her for months. Our long marriage had fortified my trust in her. She often said, "Orion, if I weren't with you, I would just die. You are my life and love." Such declarations and her consistent loyalty reinforced my confidence in her. Evelina, an attractive woman, frequently received speculative glances from men, but she always made sure to put them in their place and reaffirm our strong relationship. I was confident that her intentions were pure. Her itinerary listed just one meeting with Matthew, so it wasn't the primary reason for our trip, merely the catalyst to finally make it happen. We both had numerous other reasons to visit New Zealand. Our flight via Air New Zealand landed in Queenstown with 2 very excited passengers. Evelina was thrilled about all the activities she had planned, while I eagerly anticipated skiing on the Remarkables and visiting Glenorchy, where many Lord of the Rings scenes were filmed, a major reason for my excitement about the trip. We settled into our hotel, which had a romantic view of Lake Wakatipu. Almost immediately, Evelina got on the phone to contact Matthew. They connected, and we arranged to dine together that night. The evening went surprisingly well. Matthew was a perfect gentleman throughout, spending a significant amount of time engaging with me. Much to my surprise, I found myself quite liking him. He had a knack for knowing the right thing to say and the perfect timing for it. When a topic was exhausted, he would smoothly transition to another, keeping the conversation lively. His once boyish good looks had aged gracefully. He appeared at least 10 years younger and was evidently in great shape. That familiar crop of blonde hair I remembered from our youth still stood proudly on his head. Dressed like a businessman, he exuded confidence and poise. Evelina mostly stayed in the background of our discussions, but was fully tuned into his words. We talked about our families and how we were enjoying retirement. Any initial unease I had about the meeting quickly dissipated, so by night's end, we agreed to meet again in 3 days. Matthew mentioned that his uncle owned a vineyard in the Otago district, and since Evelina and I both loved Planet Nor, it seemed like a perfect outing. Despite it causing a slight alteration to Evelina's meticulously planned itinerary, the opportunity felt too good to pass up. Matthew seems like a nice man, I remarked as we undressed in our hotel room later that night. He certainly knows how to keep an audience engaged. He had me wrapped up in conversation all evening. It was like he was orchestrating the dialogue, leading us wherever he pleased. He'd make a great used car salesman. I chuckled, trying to keep things light. So, Evelina, what did you think? Was the visit worth it? He certainly was the entertainer, and you're right. He had a real sense for when to introduce new topics. It was amusing watching him read you like a book, Orion. Yes, it was worth it. He has changed quite a bit since we were 18. That aura of innocence is gone, but I guess age does that to everyone. I'm glad we took the time to reconnect. Thank you, Orion. I love you and really appreciate what you did for me. Now let's get to bed and show each other just how much we love each other. To tell you the truth, Evelina, tonight wasn't as much of a task as I thought it might be. I found myself falling under his spell a bit too. I actually quite liked him. Now, what's this about bed? The following day was reserved for skiing, a beloved activity for both Evelina and me. We've never been particularly skilled, as our incomes didn't afford us the luxury of frequenting the world's top ski resorts. Nonetheless, we eagerly dressed in multiple layers to fend off the biting cold and joined the queue at the ski lift. In an act of bravado, I decided to tackle the intermediate slope, while Evelina wisely chose the beginner's path. Perhaps it was a stereotypically male urge to prove something. Skiing at the Remarkables was indeed a remarkable experience. The scenery was breathtaking, with the distant town of Queenstown adding a picturesque backdrop. As I began my descent, I took little notice of the sparse number of skiers on my side of the slope, initially attributing it to luck. However, as I ventured further down, it became apparent why others had avoided this path. The final section of the slope was covered in treacherously hard, slippery snow. By the time I realized it, it was too late. I attempted to veer off to the side, but quickly lost control, skidding uncontrollably towards a stand of small trees that ultimately halted my fall and fractured my leg in the process. Fortunately, the resort's medical team was well prepared and swiftly transported me to a hospital in Queenstown. Evelina hovered anxiously, cooing and expressing concern while the medical staff attended to me. It wasn't until I was settled into a bed in a general ward that we exchanged glances and burst into laughter. Despite the pain in my leg, the irony of our predicament was hard to ignore. "Wow, Orion, you really know how to spend a holiday abroad," Evelina teased. I knew there was a reason I had to plan this trip so meticulously. The doctor says the break isn't too severe, but given your age, you'll need to stay here for at least 2 days, and then it's crutches, maybe even a moon boot. Hey, enough with the age talk, old woman. I know this has thrown a wrench in our plans, but we'll adapt. I'm sorry, Evelina. I should have respected my limitations on the slopes, but I emphasized the word. This is a perfect opportunity for you to indulge in the unplanned activities you've been hesitant about, like shopping. I noticed it wasn't on the itinerary, but you love shopping. Here's your chance to browse to your heart's content without me waiting outside each store. Go, woman. Go forth and shop. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of muffled laughter. We turned to see the duty nurse, Isolde, struggling to contain her amusement at my outburst. Evelina was now in fits of laughter, a wonderful reminder of one of the many reasons I loved her. After all these years, we could still make each other laugh, a testament to our mutual comfort and deep affection. All right, husband of mine, here's the deal. 2 days of unfettered shopping for me while you recover in this luxurious hospital, complete with room service and meals. Sound fair? What do you think, Isolde? Can I spend the next 2 days on an endless shopping spree? Isolde gave Evelina an earnest look and said, "This town is perfect for shopping. You can shop all day, eat to your heart's content, and party all night." Evelina laughed. I'm not sure about the partying, but the shopping and eating definitely sound tempting. She turned back to me. Do you think you'll be able to manage the vineyard tour with Matthew? A few glasses of fine pinot might do wonders for your leg. Plus, if I'm spending our money on luxury clothes and gourmet foods, you deserve some indulgence too. I'm not sure, Evelina. Crutches might be a bit of a hindrance, and the antibiotics might not mix well with alcohol. We'll have to see, but seriously, go ahead and shop. The next morning, Evelina joined me for breakfast, then darted off as soon as the shops opened. "See you tonight, dear," she said on her way out of the ward. Isolde watched her excited departure and quipped, "I hope your credit card is ready, Mr. Hawthorne. Everything here has a tourist price." She chuckled as she left the room. I braced myself for a day of TV in the hospital, but the frequent visits from nurses and staff, offering snacks and tea, helped pass the time. I got to know the various workers, especially Isolde, who was a local. That evening, just as I was about to dig into my neatly arranged hospital dinner, Evelina breezed in, bubbling with excitement. "Hey, how's your leg? You'll never guess who I ran into today, Matthew. Turns out he's more of a shopaholic than I am. We spent the whole day in every shop imaginable. I promise I didn't max out the credit card. The prices are outrageous, but you probably don't want to hear that. It was great having a local guide. He knew all the best places to shop and eat." Her words rushed out in a torrent before she finally settled into the chair beside my bed, kissed me, and relaxed. We shared a warm look, and I responded to her barrage of questions. "Hi, Evelina. Good to see you. The leg's doing all right. It's still a bit sore, but the painkillers help. The swelling has gone down, so the doctor says that's a good sign. Perhaps my old age isn't such a hindrance after all. Now, tell me all about your shopping adventure with Matthew." She then launched into a detailed account of her day, highlighting how Matthew had been incredibly helpful. She also mentioned that Matthew had promised to join her again the next day. Although I trusted Evelina, the glint in her eyes while she recounted the events made me suspect that her excitement wasn't solely about the shoes she almost bought. She stayed until 8 that evening and, as she was leaving, turned back to me saying, "Guess what, Orion? I didn't have that dream last night. It's gone. Isn't that great?" I nodded and waved her off. That night, I slept heavily, thanks to a strong dose of painkillers for my leg, which had been causing quite a bit of discomfort, apparently normal according to the nurses. The next morning, I woke with a start, realizing two things. It was late, and Evelina was sitting beside my bed looking tired and anxious. "Hi, sleepyhead," she croaked. "I thought I'd have to go shopping today without speaking to you. The nurse mentioned your leg was giving you trouble last night, so they knocked you out with some heavy-duty drugs. How is it now?" The concern in her eyes made me want to downplay the pain. "Hey, Evelina," I mumbled groggily. "I'm fine. Unfortunately, I might have to stay here a bit longer. The doctor is worried about some blood vessels in my leg. There's a hint of a hematoma. More rest and drugs for me. But enough about me. Did you sleep well? You look a bit tired this morning. Did that dream come back?" After a brief hesitation that I didn't pay much attention to, she replied, No. I didn't have that dream again, Orion. I'm so relieved. It's been haunting me for so long, it feels strange not having it anymore. Anyway, I was planning to shop again today. Would you prefer me to stay with you instead? You look a little worse for wear." "Evelina, I'll be lousy company all day, in and out of sleep because of the drugs. Go and shop until you drop, as we planned. The stores are already open." She left the ward once more, and I drifted back into a fitful cycle of sleep and wakefulness. Nurse Isolde visited a few times, cutting through my drug-induced haze. That wife of yours sure knows how to enjoy herself, Mr. Hawthorne. But a word of caution from a local who's seen it all. The man she's been dancing and spending time with is a snake. Be careful. I speak from personal experience. Then she exited the room, leaving me with her ominous warning echoing in my mind. I wasn't entirely sure whether what I had heard was a narcotic-induced dream or reality. Lacking the clarity to process it fully, I drifted back into sleep. I woke to the smell of dinner waiting on the bedside table. The meal helped me come to my senses a bit more, which in hindsight might not have been ideal. The pain in my leg was unbearable. After dinner, I settled back onto my pillows in that awkward half-lying, half-sitting position when Evelina wandered in, looking tired and a bit jittery. "Hi, Orion. Sorry I'm a little late. How was dinner?" She kissed me on the cheek. "Hi, Evelina. The usual. They try their best, but it's never quite like a home-cooked meal. How was your day? Am I going to need a part-time job to pay off the credit cards?" Evelina smiled. "No, Orion. Matthew paid for most things today." She stopped herself from saying more, and an awkward silence ensued until Nurse Isolde came in to take my vitals. Isolde gave Evelina a knowing look, the kind women seem to master from a young age. Evelina eventually looked away and addressed me again. "So, Orion, tomorrow is the planned visit to the vineyard and winery. I guess you won't be able to come. It's such a bummer that your leg is causing you so much trouble. I'll come in tomorrow and spend the day with you," she said, glancing at Isolde, who almost nodded in approval. What is it between these two? I couldn't help but think. It's like they're communicating in some secret code of gestures and nods. I'd have to ask Isolde about it at some point, especially since it seemed I would be here for a while. I considered asking Evelina, but knew she was eager to do more shopping. "No way, Evelina. I really appreciate you coming in whenever you do. I miss your company, but I know there's nothing more boring than sitting around in a hospital. I understand you want to be here, but this is your holiday too. I feel so bad that my foolish stunt is costing you your holiday time. Go and enjoy the vineyard. Just promise me you'll bring back a box of some great wine that we can share when I get out of here." Evelina couldn't contain her excitement. "Okay, thanks, Orion. I'll see you again tonight. Be sure to treat the nurses well." And with that, she was gone. Isolde lingered in the room, about to attend to someone else when I called her over. "Isolde, can I speak with you for a moment?" She hesitated but then stayed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hawthorne. I shouldn't have said anything to you earlier. I apologize if I spoke out of turn. Isolde, you mentioned something about my wife being a good dancer and warned me about some guy, a snake you called him. I'm sorry, but I was a bit out of it when you told me. Is there something I should know? And how do you even know Evelina is a good dancer?" Isolde visibly paled but reluctantly sat down beside the bed. "Mr. Hawthorne, what I'm about to tell you isn't something you'll want to hear. Last night, my friends and I went out to the Pink Cat, a popular nightclub here. It's known among locals as a cheap place to go if you just want to dance. Around 9 o'clock, I spotted Mrs. Hawthorne coming in with Matthew Harris. He has a way with women. He even almost charmed me once. He's incredibly persuasive, almost had me undressed in his apartment just with his sweet talk." She paused for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. I watched them for a bit, and it was obvious Mrs. Hawthorne was very close to him. I'm not sure how to say this gently, Mr. Hawthorne, but they were practically inseparable. His arm was around her most of the night, and during the slow dances, she stayed very close. It was almost as if they were a couple. I saw his hands wander too low, and his lips get much too close to hers. They left together around 11, and I don't know where they went. He was still holding her close, and even kissed her while they waited for a taxi. I'm so sorry, Orion. Can I call you Orion? This is way beyond my professional protocol, but I felt you needed to know. Unable to hold back her emotions, Isolde stifled a small sob and quickly left the room. Damn it, I exclaimed aloud. This information completely blindsided me. Never in a million years would I have expected this from Evelina. There had to be an innocent explanation. I trusted Evelina implicitly throughout our married life. There was never any hint, implied or explicit, that she would be unfaithful. She exemplified loyalty and love. She was the devoted mother of our 2 children, who adored her for her steadfastness and love. I adored her for the same reasons. She was my chosen partner in life, and we, at least I thought it was, we looked forward to spending our twilight years together, enjoying what life had to offer side by side. This visit to Matthew was supposed to be a one-time thing. I liked the guy. He seemed trustworthy, and I was somewhat relieved when he stepped in to look after Evelina while I was stuck here. I still felt guilty for ruining our holiday with my stupid accident on the slopes. Was this all a setup? My accident certainly wasn't planned, so how did things escalate so quickly into what Isolde described? Evelina isn't spontaneous. She takes her time making any sort of decision. This behavior was entirely out of character for her. She only saw him again, 2 days ago? The first meeting was with me there, and he barely paid her any attention. If his plan was to woo Evelina, he'd have shown interest from the start. My mind was in turmoil, and my leg throbbed with pain again. I buzzed for the nurse, and Isolde came in. Are you always on duty here? You always seem to be around when I'm awake. What's the deal with you nurses? Isolde smiled. Mr. Hawthorne, nurses work in odd shifts. Sometimes I finish at 10:30 and start again at 6 in the morning. Other times we have split shifts. We aren't treated too kindly by the system, but fortunately, we love our job taking care of folks like you. Now, what can I do for you? Is it your leg troubling you again, or is it what I mentioned earlier? She looked at me knowingly, with a hint of pity, something I really didn't need right now. Despite the situation, I wasn't about to take my frustration out on someone as dedicated and honest as Nurse Isolde. You're right, I admitted. I'll call in the duty doctor to take a look at your leg. Just be patient, if you'll pardon the pun, as he has a few other patients to attend to first. As she turned to leave, I asked, Isolde, is it possible to get a phone for a while? I need to make a few calls. Sure thing. It's not standard hospital procedure, but since this ward doesn't have bedside phones, I'll see what I can arrange. You're an angel, Isolde, I said as she was leaving. "I've been called that before, Mr. Hawthorne," she replied with a smile. The doctor came in shortly after and examined my leg. "Your leg is healing, Mr. Hawthorne, but some residual pain is expected as the blood vessels resume normal function. I'm pleased the swelling has gone down considerably. I'll prescribe some pain tablets, but I don't think injections are necessary anymore. Rest up, and you should be out of here in a couple of days." The phone arrived shortly after that. The hospital orderly who brought it in explained how to use it and mentioned that all calls would be added to my account. He also provided me with a paper copy of the local phone directory. The first call I made was to our hotel. The receptionist was very polite and fortunately recognized me. The first thing she asked was how my leg was. We chatted for a bit about the accident and my recovery. Casually, I asked if my wife had been any trouble, throwing wild parties, or anything like that in the room while I was away. I posed it as a bit of a joke, to which the receptionist replied, just as casually, "No, Mr. Hawthorne, no big parties. She only had your brother there last night. When she walked in around 11:30, she introduced me to him. He seemed like a very nice man. I think I've seen him around here before. I thought he was a local, but you know how it is. We see so many people coming and going. When can we expect you back?" I relayed what the doctor had said about my release and hung up. That was unusual. Receptionists don't typically share such information so freely. I wondered if she, like Nurse Isolde, suspected something was amiss and was giving me a subtle hint. I was seething as I started piecing everything together. Evelina goes shopping all day with Matthew, who's been extra helpful. Evelina goes out dancing with Matthew. They are spotted being a little too close on the dance floor. They kiss each other as they are leaving. They arrive at our hotel room together later that night. Evelina comes into the hospital room the next morning, looking very tired but excited. They're spending the day together again today. This was not a good list. My emotions were honing in on anger, and I could feel the slow boil beginning. Coupled with utter disbelief in the facts, it was a wonder that I was in any logical state of mind at all. It takes a lot for me to get angry, as I usually find other ways to handle those feelings. My main way is by sitting down with my life partner and discussing the issues. Was that possible now? How would I approach Evelina with this? I needed to make sure I was on the right track before confronting her. If I was wrong, I could seriously damage our relationship by showing such complete mistrust in her. She would be devastated by a false accusation so serious. The next call I made was to Evelina's mobile. It went straight to voicemail, so I calmly asked how her shopping day was going and mentioned that I'd speak to her later when she came to the hospital in the evening. I then called the hotel receptionist again, requesting that she inform my wife to call me as soon as she returned to the hotel. Before I could provide her with the hospital number, she interrupted me. "I can't do that, Mr. Hawthorne. Mrs. Hawthorne and your brother arrived about 10 minutes ago and went straight to your room carrying a box of wine. They are there now. Would you like me to page the room for you?" It felt as if my heart had stopped. My conscious mind fixated on the receptionist's voice, filtering out everything else. "They are in the room now, Mr. Hawthorne." I couldn't believe it had come to this. Evelina on the pill? What had happened to my Evelina? The woman I had known for so long seemed to vanish, replaced by someone who looked like her, but had undergone a complete character transformation. This was not her. This was not her. The receptionist's urgent voice broke through my stupefied state. "Mr. Hawthorne, Mr. Hawthorne, are you still there, Mr. Hawthorne?" I muttered a response and hung up. I was at a loss for what to do. Here I was stuck in this room while everything spiraled out of control beyond my reach. As I sat in a daze, Nurse Isolde came in to check my vitals. "Mr. Hawthorne, you look terrible. Are you feeling all right? Please lie down. I need to take your blood pressure, etc. Relax, please." She made me lie down and put the cuff on my arm. As the machine took its reading, she looked concerned. "Your blood pressure is too high, Mr. Hawthorne. You need to relax. Is there something I can do?" Her look of concern was genuine but turned more worried when she noticed I had been making phone calls. "Is this related to what I told you earlier?" she asked. I grimly nodded and explained what I had discovered. "Oh, Mr. Hawthorne Orion, I am so sorry. I knew I should have kept my mouth shut. It's all my fault. I started all these doubts and investigations. She was visibly distressed now. I assured her it wasn't her fault, and that if she hadn't informed me, I would have found out some other way. Is there anything I can do, Orion? I thought long and hard about that. What could a nurse stuck here in the hospital do? She was just as confined as I was. It dawned on me that there might be a way to get proof of what Evelina was alleged to be doing. I needed evidence before I could take any action. I sold. Do any of your friends have time off at the moment? I would pay them generously for their time. I just need them available for tonight and tomorrow. She thought for a moment and then brightened. Yes, Aria, a student nurse, is currently on her days off. I'm sure she could use some extra cash. You know how students are. What exactly do you need her to do? I explained my request, and Isolde immediately called Aria to present my proposition. It seemed to take a while to convince her, but once Isolde mentioned a generous payment, Aria's objections quickly dissipated. Damn, my leg hurt. That night, Evelina arrived, looking particularly cheerful and excited. She had a smug, satisfied expression on her face. Hi, Orion. Missed you today. How's your leg? You don't look too well. Hi, Evelina. My leg is feeling a bit better. The doctor said I'll be out in 2 days, so, unfortunately, you'll be on your own a little longer. Don't worry about that, Orion. I can take care of myself. By the way, the trip to the vineyard was fantastic. We spent the entire day there. It's a wonder I can walk straight after all the tastings we had. Matthew and his brother gave me a tour of the whole operation. I'm so sorry you missed it. We just got back in time for me to come here. I have to say, I'm exhausted. Do you mind if I leave early tonight? I need to get to bed. Remember, tomorrow we were planning to drive to Glenorchy. The driver is still booked, so I'll go and promise to take plenty of pictures for you. She got up to leave. Sure, thanks, Evelina. I'll see you tomorrow night, then. No need to come here early if you have to meet the driver. Love you and see you then. She glanced downward as she replied, Love you too, Orion. Now I knew for certain that the accusations about Evelina were true. She had outright lied about being at the vineyard all day. She had spent at least half the day in the hotel room with Matthew. Her other statements began to take on different meanings. All those tastings we had. I have to get to bed. I'm exhausted. A wonder I can walk straight. Innocent enough phrases, but given my state of mind, I could no longer trust anything she said. What had Evelina, my Evelina, done to my perception of her? I spoke directly with Aria and detailed what I needed her to do. She seemed almost excited about it. However, I couldn't share her excitement. What I had asked her to do would cost me a lot of money, and quite possibly my marriage. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning. The pain in my leg was insignificant compared to the ache in my heart. The dread of what was to come felt unbearable. How would I confront Evelina if the accusations were true? This went far beyond any disagreement or falling out we had ever experienced. The implications of this would linger indefinitely. What about our children? How would this affect them? Trusting Evelina again seemed impossible. I had read about couples who managed to move past infidelity, but this struck at the very core of our relationship. From this point forward, if the accusations were true, I would scrutinize every word and from Evelina for fidelity. What kind of relationship would that be? Certainly not one I could endure. I needed more proof. The next 2 days would reveal if Aria could gather the evidence I needed but dreaded. The days passed, and the doctor finally allowed me to return to the hotel, as long as I promised to take it easy. No more skiing for you this trip, Mr. Hawthorne, he quipped as I left the hospital in a wheelchair, clutching my new crutches. The hotel receptionist greeted me like a long-lost friend and remarked, We hope you can rest easy here, Mr. Hawthorne. The room has been specially cleaned and refreshed for you. She winked at me, ensuring that Evelina didn't notice. There's also a welcome back drink and some snacks for you. Enjoy. She then returned to her computer without acknowledging Evelina. The elevator ride felt somber. Evelina attempted to make small talk, but soon realized I wasn't in the mood. She might have attributed it to my hospital stay and the missed holiday activities. How wrong she was. The moment we entered the room, I asked Evelina to turn on the TV. "Aren't you going to sit with me for a while before watching that?" she asked. "I thought you'd had enough of television in the hospital." "You're right, Evelina," I replied, "but I have something to plug in if you don't mind. I can't reach the socket from this wheelchair. Here, it's a USB, just plug it into the side socket there." By this time, the TV was on. I grabbed the remote and switched the input source to the USB. The screen went blank. "Very cool, Orion," Evelina said, attempting to be humorous. "So, this is what you watched while I was out shopping." "Evelina, please sit down." The tone of my voice must have startled her. She sat down, eyes fixed on the blank TV screen. "Evelina, I want you to tell me what you've been doing while I was in the hospital." Her face paled, but she managed to steady herself. "I'm waiting, Evelina." "Orion, you know what I was doing. What's this all about?" "I went shopping, visited a vineyard, and today I went to Glenorchy to take some pictures for you," she said, her voice tinged with a defensive hesitance, like a schoolchild trying to cover up a misdeed. "Cut the crap, Evelina," I shouted, and she visibly paled. In all our years of marriage, I had never raised my voice at her in anger. "I want you to tell me what you and Matthew have been doing while I was in the hospital." "Orion, oh Orion," she began to sob. "We did spend time together, probably more than we should have, but it felt so right in the moment. We had a great time. He's such a fantastic entertainer." I laughed at his jokes and appreciated how well he knew Queenstown. "He was a big help while you were laid up." She paused, her eyes red and tearful. "I'm sorry if I spent more time with him than I told you, but—" I cut her off. "Do you think I care about the shopping and the tours?" I switched the TV to the first image on the USB. It was a photo taken last night at the Pink Club. Aria had done excellent work capturing the scene. The picture showed two people dancing intimately. The man's hand was possessively on the woman's ass, with his other hand unmistakably gripping her breast under a loose top. They were locked in a deep kiss, clearly engaged in passionate French kissing. The woman's hand was on the man's shoulder, her other hand at groin level between them. "I wonder who these two are?" I asked sarcastically. Evelina gasped, her eyes glued to the screen as she sobbed uncontrollably. Orion, I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Just tell me if that's you and Matthew last night at the club, Evelina," I shouted again. "Yes, Orion. Yes, it was," Evelina almost whispered. "I'm sorry, so very sorry. That was all there was, Orion, I prom." I didn't let her finish. "Evelina, your promises mean nothing to me." I moved to the next slide. This time, it was the same pair outside the club on the smoker's patio. The image showed the woman sitting on a low railing with her legs spread apart. The man was pressed against her at groin level, both engaged in a fervent kiss, their hands roaming over each other's bodies. What were you about to say just now, Evelina? Were you going to promise that all you did was dance a little too closely? Is that what you were about to promise? Did you say promise? My anger was bubbling over. If I didn't regain control, I might do something I'd regret. Evelina was a sobbing, slobbering mess now, her head in her hands, rocking back and forth and moaning, "No, no, no." I wheeled myself to the bar fridge and grabbed a beer. Nothing for Evelina. My anger was so intense that I no longer thought of her as Evelina. She was morphing into betrayal itself. Thanks for the pictures of Glenorchy today, Evelina, but I had my own pictures taken. I flicked through the slides, lingering on each one long enough to leave no doubt about what Matthew and Evelina had done. The first slide showed them behind some trees in the iconic low-terror forest. The second slide showed the couple coupling on the iconic green moss-covered floor of the forest. The third slide showed them in the water, clutching each other desperately and kissing passionately again. It was at this third slide that Evelina collapsed to the floor. She had fainted. I was concerned for her health, but my anger overpowered any sympathy. I thought about leaving her there and walking out of the hotel, but I needed answers. I emptied the ice bucket from the fridge over her face in a loud splash. Evelina came to, spluttering and moaning. She hugged herself and curled into the fetal position on the floor. I lifted her and unceremoniously dumped her on the bed. She began to repeat in a monotone over and over again, "No, Orion. I am so sorry. I love you. Your promises and love mean nothing to me right now, Evelina. I want to know how it happened and why. How could you betray our marriage so quickly and so openly? The kids, my God, what are we going to tell the kids? Why, Evelina? Just tell me why. Did I do something to make you disrespect not just me, but our love for each other? Our love. Our beautiful love that we experienced every day. You threw it all away for what? Why, Evelina? Tell me why." I was shouting again. If I didn't tone it down, hotel management would be here shortly. "How did it happen, Evelina?" I whispered. "Tell me how. I have always loved you, and I thought you felt the same love for me." She continued to hug herself as if it was the only place she felt safe. "I don't know, Orion. I honestly don't know. One moment, I was simply enjoying Matthew's company, and the next, I found myself entranced by him. He knew all the right things to say and all the right things to do. He made me feel like a queen, a princess, his princess. His words came out just right, and I didn't set out to fall under his spell. It just happened. I think it started on that first shopping day. After our night out, I felt very at ease with him. My guard was down. He got along perfectly with you, and I know you're usually a good judge of character. Part of me thought, if you were okay with him, then so could I be. I'm not blaming you, Orion. Please don't think that from what I just said." Her eyes pleaded with me. She tried to continue, but dissolved into another bout of sobbing. Damn it! I was so angry with her and her foolishness. For a fleeting second, I was tempted to get her a drink and some tissues, but I quickly dismissed it and let her carry on. Orion Matthew was so consuming. By the end of that first day shopping and roaming around town, he had me in his hands, literally. He began touching me every chance he got. The touches became so normal that I started to miss them when he didn't. I'm ashamed to say that I looked forward to his light touches here and there. Orion, I am so sorry, but he brought me back to our youth and my time with him on the tour. I was elated that I could feel that way again with him. The more he talked and touched, the less I thought about you. Another wave of sobbing and near wailing overtook her. How could I forget about you, Orion? Looking back now, I am thoroughly ashamed of what I was thinking, or more accurately, not thinking. That night, he took me dancing to the Pink Club. Before then, I would never have dared to go to a place like that without you. But Matthew had a way with words. He put me at ease almost instantly. He plied me with drinks, not enough to get me drunk, but enough to feel a buzz. His constant touch and presence became normal, and before I knew it, we were dancing very close. He held me tight, and it felt right somehow. All the while, he was whispering to me about how good I looked, how right we felt together, how much he missed me, and how he wished we were together. The combination of his endless compliments, the alcohol, and his overpowering closeness got to me. When he brushed his lips against mine, I was on autopilot and responded in kind. By the end of the night, we were inseparable, kissing, hugging, our hands all over each other. Orion, how could I do that? You are the love of my life, and yet I stooped so low. When he finally dropped me off at my hotel at some ungodly hour, I spent what felt like hours in the shower, trying to cleanse myself of the stain of what had happened, especially before I saw you again. I nearly died when you commented on how tired I looked the next morning. But the worst part, Orion, was that I still looked forward to seeing Matthew again that day. What is wrong with me? She began to wring her hands and disturbingly beat her own head with her open palms, as if trying to wake up from a horrific dream. I still wanted to see him again. I damned well wanted to see him again. He picked me up from outside the hospital that morning and immediately started touching me. I fell under his spell once more. We ate at a secluded cafe off the main street. How sick is that? I was loving the attention he gave me, and worse still, I craved more. By now, she was almost yelling. The enormity of her actions started to dawn on her. It didn't make me feel any better, but I knew I needed to hear the rest. Each word, each sordid detail she admitted to, made me angrier, but I let her continue. My silence must have worried her, but she pressed on. After breakfast, he took me around town again. I need to own my part in this, Orion. I promise you, I'm being honest. I know my word means nothing to you right now, and I don't blame you one bit. I know I've hurt you to your core, and frankly, I don't know how I can ever repair that hole in your heart. And then, more sobbing. He started to kiss me at every opportunity. We'd stop at a shop front, and he'd kiss me. Walking down a lane, he'd stop, hug me, and kiss me. All this attention made me hornier by the second. By lunchtime, I felt like a teenager, like his princess. He was my knight in shining armor, and I wanted him desperately. And he knew it. He played me like a master musician with his instrument. When he had me at that peak, he didn't waste time asking me up to his apartment. Like a robot, I agreed. No other thoughts crossed my mind. It was like I was someone else. The true, loving, loyal mother and wife had vanished. Well, it happened. It seemed he could go on forever. I had to stop. I had to see you. Guilt started to surface, and I left as soon as I could. I went home, showered, and tried to gather my thoughts. What had I done? Stop, Evelina. What you did was betray everything we had promised each other. I could barely speak. The details of this guy's prowess are unbelievably hard to hear, especially since it was with my wife, my love. You showed up at the hospital each day and night, pretending everything was fine, while you were screwing behind my back at every opportunity. That can't be undone, Evelina. It can't be undone. I don't know where we go from here, but I don't think I can ever forget what I saw and heard. I needed to hear from you what you and Matthew the jerk did. When you tried to whitewash it at the beginning of our talk, I realized that part of you still thinks it's all right. What makes a guy like him think it's okay to trample on someone else's marriage? I found out he has a reputation for that here in Queenstown. He's wrecked countless marriages. That's why his wife divorced him in the first place. He was screwing around on her from the start. Evelina then did something that nailed the last nail in the coffin of our marriage. She defended him. Orion, no, it wasn't like that. I asked Matthew why he was so fixated on me. He said that ever since we met as teenagers, he'd been infatuated with me. He claimed the biggest mistake he made was letting me go back then. If he'd had the money, he would have followed me and continued that innocent relationship we started. He said he always had me on his mind, even when he was married. He was never satisfied with his marriage and wanted more, which probably explains why he went to other women. When I contacted him about our visit, he was ecstatic, and that's why we are where we are now. She looked at me with those pleading eyes again. I couldn't believe the bullshit I was hearing. Evelina was actually defending him. She was trying to justify what they did as a result of a jilted relationship from years ago. Unbelievable. What about you, Evelina? Why did you do it? Don't tell me you felt the same way as him, that you missed out on something from your teenage years. I really want to know. Evelina started wringing her hands, a gesture I knew all too well. She was trying to explain. Orion, it was like he flipped a switch in me that first day. I was transported back to my teenage years. It was all or nothing. When he flipped that switch, he was on, and you and me, were off. I can't explain it any other way. There was no room for us in my head when Matthew was there. You need to leave, Evelina. Leave now. I'll call reception and have a taxi here in 10 minutes. Get your things and go. I don't care where, as long as it's away from me. I turned away from her. Evelina hesitated, but knew better than to argue. She packed her belongings, all the while murmuring, "No, Orion. You're my life. Without you, my life is over. My life is over. My life is over." The taxi arrived, and she left. The receptionist gave a knowing smile as she bade goodbye to Mrs. Hawthorne. She had seen this scene play out many times before, but remained polite to the hotel's clients. I reflected on Evelina's words and felt my anger escalate. I knew there was one more thing I had to do. I sold, "How are you? Glad I caught you when you're not working." "What's that?" "No, it didn't go well, and that's why I'm calling. Can you get me a list of all the married couples that Matthew has broken up?" "Okay, thanks for trying. By the way, tell Aria I was very impressed with her work. I'll be at our hotel if you find anything." "Okay, bye." It was 2 days before Isolde left a large envelope for me at reception. When I opened it, I realized how much work she had put into this. Isolde, you're an angel, I whispered to no one. Inside was a list of nearly 30 couples. Some were still married, but most were separated or divorced. Isolde had included the phone numbers of nearly every person affected. This was gold. I had some phone calls to make. I boarded the plane home 2 days later. I did get to see Glenorchy. I wanted my visual memory of that place to be a clean, innocent one, rather than the sordid, pornographic tableau revealed to me by Aria's pictures. Once home, I contacted lawyers to start divorce proceedings. My children were not at all impressed with how things had turned out. They were shocked beyond belief. Neither of them could understand how their mother, their reliable, stable mother, could resort to such low acts. I didn't explain too much. I wasn't just swearing out of anger. I was coldly and logically labeling what I saw. I was still totally confused about how a warm-hearted, loving, compassionate, caring, loyal human being could resort to such animalistic behavior at the click of a switch, to use Evelina's words. It troubled me so much that it flooded every part of my days. I ended up seeking counseling about it and other issues that our divorce brought up. It has helped me get over the anger and confusion of the whole sordid mess. But it didn't help with my loneliness. There was no more laughter in this household. Nearly every morning, I would wake up, go to the kitchen, and place 2 coffee cups out, waiting for Evelina to bound in and tell me about her dreams. God, I missed the old Evelina. But not those dreams, those cursed dreams of hers. Jasper and Amara, bless their hearts, saw my loneliness and spent as much time with me as possible. I might even sell the house and move closer to where they are studying. They have become city people and weren't leaving there in a hurry. Our divorce went through without a hitch. I was able to pay out Evelina for her half of the house. I packed up and sent all her stuff to New Zealand, where she was staying with Matthew. I may have accidentally pissed on some of her clothing. Okay, all of it, before I packed it all in garbage bags and boxed it up. Each photo she asked for, I meticulously doctored so it showed only her, and a picture of a female dog. I thought that represented a certain amount of justice. She pissed on our marriage, so... I heard from Isolde some time after our divorce was finalized. Apparently, all was not good in the land of Matthew. He decided that he could step out on Evelina now. Old habits die hard, and Evelina was not impressed. Funny that, a cheater didn't like being cheated on. Matthew didn't appreciate Evelina's demands that he stop. He slapped her around a bit. Enough for Evelina to end up in the hospital, hence Isolde's knowledge of their state of affairs. Isolde commended to me that, in her drug-induced sleep, Evelina would mutter over and over again, "My life is over. My life is over." Evelina dipped into a state of depression and went on to mind-numbing medication. The article in the newspaper only just mentioned the incident in the last section of the international news. An apartment belonging to a Mr. Matthew Harris was burnt in an apparent robbery gone wrong. It was believed that a group of armed men, unknown to police, entered the apartment and attacked the owner while trashing the place. In their haste to leave with the owner unconscious on the floor, the group set the apartment alight. Unbeknownst to them, a female occupant was also in the apartment. Both occupants died at the scene. I read the article and felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Of course, karma needs a helping hand sometimes. Of the 20 or so jilted men I contacted before leaving New Zealand, many took to drinking together at a local watering hole and discussed the person of interest in their failed marriages. I put the newspaper down and said aloud to the spirit of my dead ex-wife, "You were right, my dear. Your ESP was sort of accurate. You did see Matthew and now your life is over, really over. But when you saw Matthew, you didn't see that our life, which we invested so much love and time into, was also over." Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.